Are we live now?
We are live on YouTube now.
Okay, so we shall start now. Namaskar. Welcome to today's webinar, Finding Peace of Mind in a Stressful World. I'm Dr. Shreya Saha, a postgraduate resident in dermatology at Medical College and Hospital, Kolkata, also a mentor at the South Asian Medical Students Association, also known as SAMSA. On behalf of the association, I shall be your host for the evening. Prevention is better than cure, so the old adage goes, and it was never truer than with mental health. The current times, irrespective of the COVID scenario, continue to pose several challenges in our personal as well as professional lives, affecting our physical and mental health. The present day incidence and prevalence of mental health illnesses are at an all-time high. Young adults especially show higher rates of anxiety disorders, depression, suicidal ideation, stigmatization around mental illnesses, and are less likely to seek support. So then, what is the solution, we may wonder? Fortunately, we have with us today Dr. Nandini Samant from the Maharshi University of Spirituality to equip us better to tackle stress. Welcome, ma'am. I'm extremely privileged and delighted to introduce to you all our guest speaker for today. Dr. Nandini ma'am is a consultant psychiatrist at the Spiritual Research Center of Maharshi University of Spirituality in Goa. She passed her MBBS from the Goa Medical College and her DPM from Dr. B.N. Medical College, Solapur, Maharashtra. Her interest in preventive psychiatry began way back in 1994 when she was practicing as a psychiatrist in Sangli, Maharashtra. As we all might know, many mental illnesses have a relapsing course despite best medical treatment. This prompted her to look for deeper and more enduring options of therapy. And this quest led her to her mentor and spiritual guide, His Holiness Dr. Atwell, a world-renowned clinical hypnotherapist who is also the developer of personality defect model of psychotherapy. Year 2000 onwards, she has been actively using the personality defect removal process in her clinic and has found encouraging results in both the treatment as well as preventive aspects. For the past 15 years, she has been engaged in spiritual research using a variety of biofeedback machines and advanced sixth sense. This research has revealed that the basic root causes of 80% problems in life are spiritual in nature. I'm sorry, am I audible? Okay, so I'm just done with the introduction. Uh, okay, now without any further ado, I would like ma'am to take over. Just a few instructions for all attendees. Please keep a notebook and a pen handy to note down any important points that we are going to learn today. And we shall also have a live Q&A session in the last part of the webinar. So please keep your questions ready and feel free to interact via the live chat. Now I request Nandini ma'am to please take over the session.
Namaskar. At the outset, I would like to thank SAMHSA for giving me this wonderful opportunity to present this topic to you. I have to make special mention of Dr. Shriya Saha in particular for her unstinted efforts in making this event possible. I will now begin my topic by paying obeisance to my Guru, His Holiness Dr. Athavale. The basic quest behind all that we strive for in life is to attain happiness and peace of mind. Yet, in today's fast paced world, finding and retaining happiness and peace of mind is as elusive as standing on a beach and trying to catch foam in the sea. And this was brought even more strikingly to my notice only 2 days back when I read the conversation with a teacher of my 8-year-old niece, Geetika, residing in San Diego. Geetika, a grade 3 student, and her class was asked, "Do you think pets should be allowed in school or not?" And her reply was, "Pets should be allowed in school. I think so because their soft fur makes you feel calm. It also helps distract stress and makes learning fun." This conversation of this bright, precocious puppet made me realize how stress is deeply entrenched in our lives. Unfortunately, for something as important as peace of mind, which all of humankind craves for, it is strange that the subject of finding and retaining happiness and peace of mind is not taught to us in our schools and colleges. In fact, we are pretty much left to our own devices when it comes to finding happiness and peace in life. As a result, the practical reality is that many of us stumble in this regard as life's problems hit us at every stage of our lives, robbing us of our happiness and peace. And in some cases, the damage is irrecoverable. In psychiatric practice, it is often seen that the patients come for therapy repeatedly with varying periods of apparently normal behavior in between therapy sessions. In such cases, their stress tolerance is low, and with every new stress, they break down and come back for more therapy. Thus, what is offered to the patients is a solution to each crisis and not a permanent solution. As the root cause is not tackled in these cases, the patient's stress tolerance remains low. Is there any way to change this? In today's presentation, I will share with you my experience with a holistic approach to a permanent solution to overcome stress. I represent the Maharshi Adhyatma Vishwavidyalaya, also known as the Maharshi University of Spirituality. It is founded by His Holiness Dr. Athavale, a world-renowned clinical hypnotherapist. He has experience of 23 years of clinical practice, 51 years in psychological research, and 39 years in spiritual research. Let's have a look at our agenda for today's webinar. I'll begin by giving you an overview of why we get stressed. Then we will go on to learn about the personality defect removal process and how to use it to overcome our undesirable traits, also known as personality defects, and turn them into qualities. For this, I will draw upon the personality defect model of psychotherapy developed by His Holiness Dr. Athavale. We will then go on to understand how spirituality helps in reducing stress. I will touch briefly on spiritual practice and a sattvic lifestyle. I will also share 2 case studies. Let us begin by taking a stock of the world stress figures compiled by the Global Organization for Stress. According to the American Psychological Association, 75% of adults reported experiencing moderate to high levels of stress in the past month, and nearly half reported that their stress has increased in the past year. A report by Lifeline Australia claims that 91% of adult Australians feel stress in at least one important area of their lives. Almost 50% feel very stressed about at least one aspect of their life. A survey by the Regus Group shows that stress levels in the workplace are rising, with 6 in 10 workers experiencing increased workplace stress in major global economies. China, at 86%, recorded as having the highest rise in workplace stress. A study by the World Health Organization reveals that depression is among the leading causes of disability worldwide. A survey conducted in 2019 by Cigna TTK Health Insurance says that 89% of India's population is suffering from stress. Sadly, most don't feel comfortable talking to medical professionals. These figures are not updated, but I can assure you, with time, the stress worldwide has only increased. The situation looks pretty grim, isn't it? So let's see what can be done to overcome it. Each and every one of us experiences stress in daily life. It is like we are juggling between different problems, be it dealing with an alcoholic father, difficulties in adjusting to hostel life, stress in a relationship, and financial difficulties. We keep gulping them without any release until we reach a limit. And then one small thing, like breaking a mobile screen, happens, and we cannot take it anymore. This small mishap acts as the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. People may feel it is such a small thing, but inside we know that we have been bearing so many things. We just cannot handle this one more thing. This is because our mind can handle stress up to a certain level. After that point, any trivial incident can tip the balance. We get overwhelmed and start having physical and psychological symptoms. Actually, we have to face various problems daily. But due to previous stress caused by other problems we were facing, breaking our mobile screen brought a breakdown. Can anyone relate to this slide? We can think about it. Have you ever wondered why some people have more stress tolerance than others? When I was young, I used to wonder how one of my friends would be so stoic, even in very challenging situations, while for me, it was quite a struggle. So, depending on our capacity for stress tolerance in the face of a stressful situation, we may be overcome with stress or be entirely relaxed, or if the stress is beyond our capabilities, we may just flee from the scene. Where do you see yourself? Scenario 1, 2, or 3? Later in life, I learned that a situation by itself is never stressful. How a person views or reacts to the situation is what makes it stressful. For example, a party is generally an enjoyable event. But if I am a reserved person or due to some past negative incident, it becomes highly stressful. Also, the ability to tolerate stress will depend greatly on how we view a stressful situation and on the environmental situation at that moment. For example, if we stumble in a lonely place, we will just get up and continue to walk as if nothing has happened. But if we happen to be self conscious and stumble in a crowded street, we may feel embarrassed and get very anxious about it. Usually, we feel that I am stressed because of external stresses, like I'm facing ragging by my seniors, exam stress, health and or financial issues, or I go to a place and it is hit with natural disaster, etc. When we look at these external factors, we feel that I am stressed because of all these external factors and situations. However, research has shown that the main cause of stress is our internal stressors. Our undesirable traits or personality defects, such as anger, anxiety, laziness, jealousy, impulsiveness, and emotionalism, affect us adversely, causing our stressful response in different situations. Another important internal stressor is our unfinished business. At a deeper level, our undesirable personality traits and unfinished business make us react adversely to various stresses, and hence we experience instability and unhappiness, thereby losing our peace of mind. In most situations, we cannot change our external stresses, but what we can do is reduce our internal stresses. This in turn will make our response to any given external situation less stressful, or eventually the external situation will cause no stress. The more the undesirable traits that we have, the more the stress and discontent we will experience. Now, what is unfinished business? An event or some events which had happened in the past and which now heavily influence the way we perceive present situations and how we respond to them is known as unfinished business. This could be consciously or subconsciously affecting our thought processes and how we view the world. Thus, unfinished business is nothing but our past unpleasant experiences. Think of it as filters with which we view the world. Let me give you an example of one of my clients. We no longer call them patients. In his childhood, his father would tell him day in and day out, "You are stupid." This left a strong mark on his personality. Deep insecurity developed in him. So he saw every situation through the filter of that unfinished business. Even if someone had a slightly different viewpoint, yet this person, because of his unfinished business, would feel that others are trying to challenge him or they are trying to put him down. He would not be able to remain objective. So the unfinished business colors our thoughts, demeanor, and thinking, causing discontent. Another client had a traumatic experience with the opposite sex, was bullied in school, was exposed to a lot of family infighting and injustice in the way he was treated. Then, when faced with normal situations in the present, he would perceive it with the view of what had happened earlier and conclude negatively that now also the same injustice is happening to him. Even though the present situation is not like that, due to unfinished business, he would lose objectivity and give a disproportionate response. Another of my clients, as a child, had failed in maths exams, and his parents had then called him a failure. This incident was so deeply etched in his mind that later on in life, wherever he could not succeed, even in a small way, he automatically thought of himself as a failure. As we saw in this slide and the one before, the external stressors or situations were a mere trigger. The underlying internal stressors, that is, our undesirable traits, also known as personality defects, and the unfinished business, were the root cause why they responded in the adverse way they did. As we saw in the intro slide, since finding happiness and peace of mind is such a big deal for all of us, His Holiness Dr. Athawale has spent a lifetime researching this aspect with the goal of helping people experience a better quality of life. And today, I would like to share some of our insights from the 39 years of spiritual research devoted to improving the quality of human life. The research conducted by His Holiness Dr. Athawale identified that the root cause of stress is our undesirable traits, also known as personality defects. The intensity and type of personality defects determines how people react to the same situation. So he went on to pioneer the personality defect removal, that is, the PDR process, to improve people's lives. He effectively treated thousands of patients and also shared this method with professionals through various media. He held workshops to train other doctors in this technique. Later, he introduced this as the first step to personal transformation for thousands of spiritual seekers from all over the world. Let me now quote the first line of a very well-known verse from the Brahma Bindupanishad. Man evam manushanam karanam bandha moksha yoho. Meaning, our mind is the cause or determining factor for our happiness, unhappiness, peace, discontent, material bondage, or spiritual liberation. Considering the non-medico attendees in this webinar, I have kept this slide a very simplified version of our mind. This slide is very important and central to the whole concept of PDR. So we can try to pay keen attention to this slide. In simplistic terms, our mind is made of conscious and subconscious mind. Our conscious mind represents only 10% and the subconscious mind is 90%. This practically means that we are aware only of 10% of things that happen to us, and the rest 90% we are unaware or partially aware of. The subconscious mind stores millions of impressions. To give you an analogy, the conscious mind is like the shop front of the IKEA, while the subconscious mind is like the full IKEA warehouse behind. The dots that you see in the slide are called impressions. There are desirable and undesirable impressions. For example, I have empathy. So the moment I see someone in need of aid, I rush to help. I do this many times. So the desirable impression of empathy gets formed in the subconscious mind. Now suppose I do many actions of laziness, like I get up late, I don't clean my cupboard, I don't complete my project work on time. Then an impression of laziness is formed in my subconscious mind. These impressions keep sending impulses to our conscious mind, and the conscious mind gets dictated by these impulses and acts accordingly. Thus, the subconscious mind affects our every action, thought, feeling, and emotion, and decides if we will experience pleasure or misery. The subconscious mind contains millions of impressions in the form of our likes and dislikes, temperament, and give and take. These are later grouped as centers, which jointly influence a person's response to any stimulus. For example, if we like or dislike some food, the processing to that reaction takes place in the mind. So also, if we end up liking or disliking a person, that too gets processed in our mind. Suppose I have an impression of anger. Say I wanted hot steaming coffee and the waiter got lukewarm coffee. Unknown to me, an impulse from the impression of anger from the temperament center goes to my conscious mind. The conscious mind does not know anything better, and I become angry. The mind contains impressions of both our qualities such as patience and defects such as anger. Qualities provide us with mental stability, a positive outlook, and happiness and peace, while personality defects increase mental instability, a negative outlook towards life, and unhappiness. That is why Emerson once said that for every minute you are angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. We act, react, and think based on impulses that emanate from the impressions in our subconscious mind. The nature of our mind is due to impressions we have accumulated over our current and previous lifetimes, and this, to a large extent, makes up our personality. Desirable impressions or qualities and undesirable impressions or defects make up our personality. While performing any action, when the same impression in the subconscious mind keeps surfacing repeatedly, they are called personality. In short, personality means a person's nature. In many individuals, the occurrence of these impressions is so often that one can classify it as their defects or qualities. Suppose I am very impatient in many situations. I cannot wait in a queue. I am in a hurry to finish conversations. So impatience is my undesirable trait or personality defect. But I am also a very courageous person. So I go out of my way, risking my life for people. So this is an impression of a desirable trait or quality in me, like the employees of Taj Hotel did during the 26/11 attack in Mumbai. Now, generally, out of our total actions and reactions, 50% are proper and 50% are improper. Due to improper actions and reactions, either we or others face problems. Therefore, we should pay attention to our actions and reactions constantly. The main 20 to 30 characteristics in us constitute the bulk of our personality. Incorrect impressions in the mind, which lead to incorrect thoughts and actions that are harmful for us and adversely affect others, are known as personality defects. During a quarrel, have you ever felt absolutely justified and convinced that it is his fault? When we get angry, even if we justify that it is because the other person is at fault, in addition to the person who is the recipient of our anger, we too suffer a lot. Personality defects make life difficult not only for us, but also for our family members, friends, colleagues, and our patients as well. And that is why we need to remove them. How do we face situations in life? Do we rise up to the occasion like a lion and face it, or become a kitten and hide? How we view or rise to face a situation or a problem depends on our qualities and defects. The personality defect removal process, pioneered by His Holiness Dr. Athawale, helps us become a lion when it comes to facing difficult situations in our life. As per the personality defects removal model, there are 3 steps in the process of PDR. The first is to observe and identify the problem, which means to closely look at the situation and clearly name the problem. The second step is to analyze the problem and find the solution. The third step is to frame and give appropriate autosuggestions. In the first step of observation, we just look at ourselves impartially and continuously. This regular exercise makes us aware of our shortcomings or mistakes. Remember the simple rule: anything that disturbs our happiness or peace of mind is an indication of an underlying personality defect. Whenever we become aware of our mistake, we should note it down so we can analyze it in the second step of the process. We can also become aware of our mistakes by observing others' response to our actions. Sometimes they actively point out our mistakes. For example, my son told me, "You left the front door unlocked last night after coming back from work." The third way to learn about our mistakes is from others' shortcomings. When we see or listen to someone else's mistake, we can think if we also have committed a similar mistake. For example, my colleague told me she forgot her purse in the supermarket. Even though I have not made the mistake, I feel I definitely don't want to make it. Remember, we ourselves are not always aware that we have made a mistake. How our awareness increases over time will be clear from the chart in the slide. Let me give you an example to explain how the awareness grows. Junior resident Dr. Chatterjee is lazy and does not fill the history sheet in time. In the first stage, there is no awareness that he is not filling the history sheet in time. His registrar tells him and he gets angry. In the second stage, when his registrar points out his mistake, he just accepts superficially. In the third stage, he realizes it himself after he has been lazy for some time in filling the sheet. In the fourth stage, as he is thinking of leaving the filling of history sheet for later, he becomes aware that he is wasting time. In the fifth stage, he becomes aware even before reaching the filling of history sheet stage, that is, as the patient's history is being taken. And in the sixth stage, he doesn't make the mistake at all. When we do the PDR process regularly, our awareness of mistakes increases rapidly. Writing our mistakes in the PDR diary hastens the process. Our mistakes can be categorized as undesirable or incorrect action, thought, emotion, or incorrect reaction, or both incorrect action and reaction in the same incident. An example of an incorrect action would be, I pricked my finger while capping the needle. Here, the personality defect, or PD in short, is carelessness. Example of an incorrect thought would be, I will never be able to get the pediatric sheet. I will never be able to do well in life. I never seem to be good enough. Here, the PD is negative thinking. Example of an incorrect emotion would be, how come Renu has found true love when she is not even as good looking as I am? Here, the PD is jealousy. Example of an incorrect reaction would be, I was irritated when my co-intern did not show up for duty and I had to do all the work. Here, the PD is expectations. Example of an incorrect action and reaction would be, when a car cut me off on the highway, I got very angry. I immediately accelerated past the car and abused the car's driver. Here, the PD is expectations. As I said earlier, by maintaining a diary every day of our incorrect actions and reactions, we get to understand the trends in our personality. We are also able to understand the frequency and intensity by which a personality defect surfaces. After writing our mistake, the next step is of analyzing the mistake. To analyze a mistake, we ask different questions to ourselves. That is why the diary has the following columns: date of the mistake itself, whether the mistake is of incorrect action or reaction, has someone told us or we realized our own mistake, when we became aware of the mistake, its duration, noting personality defects responsible for mistake, and the solution, or autosuggestion. Let us consider a simple mistake: not washing my coffee mug. What is the type of mistake? Is it incorrect action, thought, emotion, incorrect reaction, or both? This is at the action level. Did I become aware of the mistake on my own, or someone else made me realize the mistake? This helps to understand one's awareness about the mistake. Now, in this example, the mistake was noted by others. Who caused the situation or the mistake? Self or others? Whose personality defect caused the most stress in the situation, or the main cause of the mistake? This is important because this decides the autosuggestion technique. Diary of mistakes, if maintained daily, will make us realize all our incorrect actions, reactions were there, and enable us to find the defect responsible for them. Now, in this example, let us see how we analyze our mistake to pinpoint the root PD. Identifying the defect causing the mistake. Why did I not wash the coffee cup? So, scenario 1 could be, I did not feel like washing the mug because I was tired. Here, the PD would be laziness. Scenario 2 could be, my time is meant for more important things. My mom can do it. The PD is pride. Scenario 3 could be, I had all intentions of washing the mug, but I had too many things to do. Here, the PD is lack of planning and prioritization. Similarly, we can ask ourselves why I committed a particular mistake and come to know the root defect. This slide shows some frequently found personality defects. You can go through it and see if you have any of them. After learning about our mistakes, writing them in the diary, and analyzing them, we become aware of the main defects that are responsible for majority of our mistakes. We can now use autosuggestions to overcome our mistakes and defects. Autosuggestions are suggestions given to the subconscious mind to neutralize the undesirable impressions in our mind and thereby to eventually overcome our defect. Remember the mind slide which showed us how impressions of PDs send wrong impulses to the conscious mind? When we or others try to explain something to ourselves or give affirmations, it affects the conscious mind. However, the impressions of our personality defects are rooted in the subconscious mind. The barrier between the conscious and subconscious mind opens up in a state of physical and mental relaxation, and the suggestion given in that state influences the subconscious mind. For therapeutic purposes, the depth of relaxation is only 5% important, whereas the autosuggestions are 95% important. Let's take an example. Vidya shares a room as a paying guest with a colleague, Bindu. Say Vidya has an impression of selfishness in her subconscious mind. Now, from this impression, impulses go to her conscious mind. Let Bindu do the room cleaning. You don't clean the room. Her conscious mind gets dictated by that wrong impulse and she doesn't clean the room. She leaves it to Bindu. By giving an autosuggestion, she can make herself aware of her incorrect thought and action and correct it. Autosuggestions help to counter all incorrect thoughts, emotions, actions, and reactions which clutter the mind. Autosuggestions are positive, tailor-made suggestions that we give to our mind to counteract negative impressions so that our defects are eventually neutralized. The autosuggestion, AS for short, needs to be tailor-made because the mistakes which we make, someone else may not make. We repeat the positive suggestion in daily sessions, which helps to develop required quality. By the rule that every repeated action strengthens the impression, when we repeat the positive suggestion to the mind again and again, the mind begins to understand that my thoughts or behavior is not correct. I need to change my thoughts, behavior, actions, reactions, and it begins to change. Think of an AS as rewiring the mind to think in a proper manner. Autosuggestions are given to correct our incorrect actions and reactions, and also to correct our reaction when others make a mistake. Based on these, there are 7 types of AS. A1 is psychofeedback. A2 is response substitution. A3 is desensitization, which means imagery or visualization of the scene. B1 and B2 are like A1 and A2, except that here the defect in the situation is of others. C1 is repetition of a word or chant, and C2 is aversion or punishment. When the other techniques do not work, or if there are obsessions, compulsions, suicidal ideas, and hallucinations, we use the C2 technique. When deciding the type of autosuggestion, after committing a mistake, we ask ourselves who is responsible for the mistake, or whose PDs are the main cause of the mistake or stress caused in a situation. When stress is caused more predominantly due to my personality defects, then it is A type. And when it is predominantly due to others' personality defects or the situation, then it is B type of AS. Think of it as who is the main player in the situation. Is it me or is it the other person who is creating the whole issue? If it is me, then it is A type. If others, then B type. Let us now have a look at some guidelines while framing autosuggestions. First of all, keep it simple. Autosuggestion should be framed using simple and a limited amount of words. It should start with whenever, indicating specific incident in future tense. Autosuggestions should always be positive. Avoid words like don't, no, not, won't, can't, etc. For example, we should not say, I will not be angry. Instead, we should say, I will remain calm. AS should be specific and not generalized. For example, instead of when people look at me and I become shy, to state the exact incident, which is whenever I feel awkward and shy when Meera looks at me. In the given incident, there may be more than one defect involved, but give autosuggestion for one defect at a time. For example, if the mistake is, Dr. Mukherjee, the anesthetist, reached the operation theatre late and then got angry when the surgeon pointed it out. Here, Dr. Mukherjee should give AS either on tardiness, that is being late, or on anger. When there are more than one incidents for one defect, choose only one incident for AS, which occurs more often. For example, Saumitra has a fear of flying, as also fear of speaking in front of unknown people. He should choose the second incident to address fear. Do at least 3 AS sessions every day. Write the autosuggestion and read it 5 times if unable to remember. Later, we need to do 5 AS per day. To give you an idea of how we go about framing our autosuggestions, let me give you 2 examples. Say the mistake is, I was feeling frustrated and decided to start studying for exams earnestly from tomorrow. Now, here, the type of mistake is incorrect action, made aware by self. Who's responsible? Self. What is the PD? Laziness. Now, how to frame this AS? We will begin the AS with an incorrect action, thought or emotion, add a few words to create awareness, and then end with words to control it by correct action. So here our AS will be, whenever I postpone studying for exams, I will remind myself that I want to do post-graduation in pediatrics and start studying promptly. Say the mistake is, I felt depressed for days when I did not get a good rank in NEET PG. Here, the type of mistake is incorrect reaction, made aware by, again, self. And who's responsible? Self, of course. What is the PD? Emotionalism and expectations. How to frame? We will begin with the incident provoking the reaction and substitute it with a desirable reaction. So the AS will be, whenever I will get thoughts that I did not get a good rank in the NEET PG, I will realize that such incidents are a part and parcel of life and that some better opportunity may come along. Every session consists of relaxation exercise and autosuggestion. This session lasts for about 5 minutes. We can see the breakup in the slide. We begin with efforts for physical and mental relaxation, which can be done by closing our eyes to shut the external world, followed by deep breathing, focusing attention on our breathing, or prayer and chanting for 2 to 2.5 minutes. Then we give the autosuggestion. We repeat it 5 times to create an impression in our subconscious mind. We end the session by giving suggestion to the mind about persevering in the autosuggestion sessions. Remember, just 5 minutes to give an AS could well change your life. When we start giving AS for a defect based on a certain manifestation, it goes on to slowly cleanse the other areas of manifestations of that defect. Taking untidiness as an example, if we are untidy about clothes, untidy about books, untidy about shoes, etc., then we can take one manifestation of untidiness per week in the autosuggestion. After 4 to 5 weeks, usually there is improvement in 4 to 5 manifestations of untidiness. Then, by the law of generalization, untidiness in other areas also gets automatically corrected. Let us look at the steps in the PDR process. During the PDR process, in the first 3 months, we give autosuggestions for the incidents we have noted in the daily chart. Gradually, the distressing day-to-day incidents reduce in intensity and frequency. After 3 months, we give autosuggestions for the defects marked in the PD and ego list. When there is some improvement in one defect, we can move on to suggestions about another defect. This is because some improvement indicates a momentum in the direction of overcoming that defect. Hence, it is not necessary to continue till that particular defect is totally overcome. When we change AS after a week or 2, we also give a progress AS. This is to keep up the motivation. The AS about good qualities is given when there is depression to boost self-worth. Many people who have regularly implemented the PDR process have said that they have found immense benefits in their lives. We conducted a survey to understand how the PDR process had benefited the lives of those who practiced it. It was a random sample of subjects who were implementing the PDR process. The sample size was 50. 90% of the subjects were also professionals in their field. These subjects were from 12 countries. The average years that subjects in this sample have been implementing the PDR removal process is 6.9 years. The survey was conducted online and the respondents answered it from their homes or work locations in their respective countries. In the survey, all the respondents were asked to list what were the 3 main personality defects that they had prior to starting the PDR process that would create the most stress and anxiety in their lives. Using the PDR process, the average time taken to reduce the intensity of their personality defects by 50 to 80% was 2 years and 5 months. Over 70% of the PDs reduced by 50 to 80% within a period of 3.5 years. Everyone reported that practicing the PDR had improved relations and efficiency. 73% said it improved interpersonal relations by a high degree, and 77% said it had improved their work efficiency by a high degree. The survey conducted by the Maharshi University of Spirituality endorsed the PDR process as a key enabler for reducing stress, increasing performance, efficiency, and better interpersonal relations. PDR therefore needs to be treated as a way of life. We had the opportunity of presenting our research papers on this topic in various international conferences held in India and abroad, where the topic was very well received. And in the conference held at Jaipur, we received the Best Presentation Award. His Holiness Dr. Athawale has written many books on this topic. I am showing you just 4 among them to give you an idea of the areas we can use it. The first book is Autohypnotherapy for Physical Ailments. You can see the various ailments such as headache, obesity, asthma, stammering, twisting the neck, and epilepsy, where AS can be used successfully either as an adjuvant or in some cases by itself. The next is Autohypnotherapy Volume 1. In this book, His Holiness Dr. Athawale has explained the various treatment methods of psychological illnesses. He covers topics such as the various reasons for failure in exams and associated remedies. Topics such as sleep talking, lack of confidence, phobias, addictions are also covered. And this is Autohypnotherapy Volume 2. In this book, His Holiness Dr. Athawale has explained the specific method of treating disorders such as OCD, hallucinations, suicide, MDP. This book contains a very interesting case study of a man who brought about a complete turnaround in his personality for the better in just 7 weeks. Autohypnotherapy for sexual problems. In addition to clearing the misconceptions of readers after reading so-called scientific articles on masturbation, His Holiness Dr. Athawale goes on to specific therapy for sexual problems such as premature ejaculation, impotency, and ego-dystonic sexual orientation. Having understood the psychological aspect of reducing stress, let me share in brief about how spirituality complements it. Actually, His Holiness Dr. Athawale started his career as a doctor and soon moved into the field of mental health. After years of practicing as a clinical hypnotherapist and conducting extensive research in the field of psychology and mental health both in India and in the United Kingdom, he found that while he had a very good cure rate of 70%, 30% of his patients did not recover completely. He learned, however, that some of these patients with whom he had little success had recovered after adopting some spiritual measures. Now, at that time, His Holiness Dr. Athawale was an atheist, basically a man of science. Yet, these alternative spiritual cures intrigued him, and what he would learn through these patients would change the entire course of his life forever. He visited saints from different spiritual paths all over India. He asked them questions about the theory of spirituality as well as spiritual practices, and he meticulously recorded and studied their answers. He began to realize that the spiritual dimension was all pervasive in influencing a person's physical and mental well-being. As accomplished as he was in his profession, in the face of these new learnings, he transformed from a man of science to a person completely immersed in spiritual life. Statistics show that His Holiness Dr. Athawale is not alone in understanding the importance of spirituality and religion in health. To quote a concrete example, in 1992, only one of the 126 accredited US medical schools were offering courses on spirituality and medicine. And in 2014, 75% of them were offering these courses. Again, these figures are not updated, but you can see the trend. This graph shows the religion, spirituality, and health articles published per 3-year period and is non-cumulative. And you can see how the interest in this field is growing. Generally, studies show that people with higher levels of spirituality and religiosity have lower levels of depression, lower levels of suffering, engage in less substance abuse or dependence, and have a lower prevalence of chronic disease, have a higher tolerance for pain. They also live longer, are less prone to committing suicide, and most importantly, they experience a better quality of life. However, while the mind-body-spirit connection is becoming more and more acceptable to modern-day medical practitioners, the exact meaning and understanding of this connection has not yet been crystallized. Here, I would like to share with you a fundamental concept that needs to be understood. As per spiritual science, Adhyatma Shastra, there are 3 subtle components of the universe, namely Sattva, Raja, and Tama, that are in all of creation, visible or invisible. Sattva is the component that represents spiritual purity and knowledge. Raja represents action and passion, while Tama represents ignorance and inertia. The subtle vibrations emanating from anything and everything are dependent on the predominant subtle basic component they are comprised of. From a medical perspective, an increase in the Sattva component brings about wellness and a healing effect. An increase in the Raja and Tama components leads to disease and mental ill health. So the spiritual science behind any curating healing or change is based on increasing the Sattva component and reducing the Rajatama. For example, disease germs are Raja and Tama predominant. So, if one has, say, pneumonia, it means that the Rajatama vibrations in that organ have increased. In addition to giving the appropriate antibiotics, having a clean and sterile environment is one physical step towards having a Sattva predominant environment that helps in the healing process. There are many other spiritual steps that one can take to increase the proportion of the sattva component. Having given you a holistic background as to why we experience unhappiness and discontent, I would like to share with you the two things you can do in addition to the PDR process to transform your mind. The first is chanting the name of God, and the other is living a spiritually purer lifestyle. Chanting the name of God is a simple and yet powerful spiritual practice. As we start chanting the name of God, impressions related to it are created in the subconscious mind. As we persevere in chanting, a devotion center is created in the subconscious mind. The spiritual vibrations that are generated through the center directly begin to purify the mind. This means, by its sheer positivity, it begins to reduce negative impressions in the mind. It envelops the person chanting with a protective spiritual sheath that insulates him from distressing vibrations. Faith increases the size of the devotion center, and faith is augmented by higher spiritual experiences and positive changes in our basic nature. Some people may wonder which name of God to chant. In the case of spiritual practice, one of the easiest things that a person can do is chant the name of God as per the religion of his birth. Another option is to chant the name of God as per one's liking. However, remember that this is at a psychological level and does not yield benefit at the spiritual level as much as the other two options given in the slide. Alternatively, one can also chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which is a chant we have found to be very effective in current times. Now let me share with you an experiment conducting using a biofeedback machine. A visiting researcher from the US, Dr. Pradeep Deshpande, used an instrument known as GDV BioWell to measure the effect of chanting on the Kundalini chakras. GDV BioWell is an instrument that shows the state of a person's energy field and his chakras. The experiment was conducted in a room that had been the temporary residence of His Holiness Dr. Athole for 6 months. It is now used as a meditation room. For this experiment, Dr. Deshpande asked subjects in our spiritual research center to chant in that room for a period of 40 minutes. And this is a view of how the chakras of a subject looked before and after the chanting of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya for just 40 minutes in the ashram meditation room. You can see, before chanting, only one chakra appeared on the vertical line, and the size of all chakras is smaller than the corresponding ideal size of the chakras. We can see that after chanting, 5 chakras appear on the vertical line, and the size of 6 of the 7 chakras has increased towards the ideal size of the chakras. You can see how the chakras are looking more aligned and even bigger. This indicates increased balance and energy. We already learned that from a medical perspective, an increase in the sattva component brings about wellness and a healing effect. Let us look at an everyday example of how a common decision that we make about the food that we eat can affect our sattvika. We conducted an experiment where we used the universal aura scanner. It is an instrument developed by Dr. Mannam Murthy, a former nuclear scientist, which is used to measure the positive and negative subtle energy and the aura around any living or non-living object. 2 subjects were chosen for this pilot study. One subject was at a higher spiritual level, while the other was at a lower spiritual level. Both were asked to eat the same dish of chicken and fish along with rice and chapati for lunch from the same restaurant. Later, after 2 days, they were asked to eat the vegetarian meal prepared in the Spiritual Research Center and ashram. Before and after readings were taken using a US. What we found was that negative energy increased in both the subjects after eating non-vegetarian food. The seeker at a higher spiritual level also completely lost his positive energy aura. Even after 2 days, his readings continued to show that he had not regained the positive aura he had before eating the non-vegetarian food. After the vegetarian meal, they started to regain their positivity, but it was nowhere near the positive aura that they had lost after eating non-vegetarian food. Please note that we are not talking about the physical attributes of food, such as proteins and fats, but the subtle vibrations at the sattva rajatama level that are associated with it and how it affects our constitution at a subtle level. Subtle is that which is beyond the understanding of the five senses, mind, and intellect. A full understanding of the effect of diet or food or anything for that matter at the subtle level can only be determined through advanced sixth sense. We have seekers at the Spiritual Research Center like Ms. Priyanka Lotlikar, seen here in the slide, who can visually perceive vibrations and draw what they see. These drawings, based on subtle knowledge, are like spiritual X-rays, which give the average person a never-before-seen view of the subtle dimension. And this is Ms. Yoya Wale, a seeker from Europe, and she is a part of the spiritual research team at the Maharshi University of Spirituality. Her hearing and speech are impaired, but she has an advanced sixth sense of vision and can experience spiritual vibrations that an average person is not able to feel. She drew the subtle vibrations emanating from meat. It shows that the item was covered with distressing vibrations. And this is what Priyanka saw around the rice and dal meal. The picture shows very clearly the spiritually positive effect of the vegetarian meal. Now, the thing is, by eating a non-vegetarian meal, one may say, I cannot feel the negative vibrations, but they are still there. Inability to feel subtle vibrations is due to a lack of sixth sense ability. A number of preferences or choices which increase raja and tama in us affect us deeply for varying periods. This includes our hairstyle, our dress, the colors we use, furniture, the music we listen to, etc., etc. And the thing is that everything adds up. Now we may think, but I have been a regular non-vegetarian since birth. How can I adjust to a vegetarian fare? I know. I, being a Goan, have faced this dilemma. But it is quite simple, really. Think of the corona scenario. Pre-corona times, who would have thought social distancing, PPE, lockdown for weeks on end, etc. would be possible? Well, the whole world adapted to it, isn't it? Why? Because they were made aware of the situation and the risk they were facing. Well, in time, all of us took into account the risk-benefit ratio and made informed decisions. Similarly, understanding the disadvantages of a non-sattvic lifestyle versus the benefit of a sattvic lifestyle, we can start taking small baby steps towards reducing the rajatama in our lives. Another aspect to take into account is that in the initial stages, wherever we find it absolutely impossible to cut upon the rajatama, we can compensate by increasing the sattva by measures such as chanting, which can be done any time of the day and with some practice, most of the time without interrupting or affecting our busy routine. We know that today's stress, depression, addictions, suicide, marital problems, etc., are on a steep rise. All these issues have their root cause in personality defects that weaken a person's mind, which shows the importance of the PDR process for psychological as well as physical health. PDR therefore needs to be treated as a way of life. If one complements this PDR process with some regular spiritual practice according to one's faith, as well as a step at a time shift to a sattvic lifestyle, we have seen that the benefits are enhanced. This holistic process addresses subtle impressions in the subconscious mind and brings about long-lasting transformation in personality. Now, just to give you a glimpse of how the PDR works in real-life scenarios, I will share some case studies with you. The first case study is of a 19-year-old student. His mother was the one who thought it may benefit him to see me. He was doing very poorly in studies for the past 3 years. In frustration, he had dropped out of college. Then about a year later, he took it up again, only to drop it in a few months because it was too much for him. Over a period of 3 to 6 months, his irritability had gradually increased. When he came to me, it was beyond bearable to him as well as to his parents and siblings. There was a lot of attention-seeking behavior with periods of sulking in between. He would be completely closed in at times when he would just lie in bed in despair for hours during the daytime. And at other times, he would aggressively demand that others give him time to listen to his heart's pourings. He would feel utterly frustrated if others didn't oblige him. Then he would feel rejected and miserable. His mental status examination was normal, except for an inappropriate affect. That is, he would have a kind of a silly smile plastered on his face all the time. This smile would in turn frustrate and irritate others. His psychological tests, including an IQ score of 90, showed that he fell into the category of borderline intellectual disability as per DSM-5, mental retardation as per DSM-4. Explaining his intellectual disability to the concerned important others took the performance pressure off him. Risperidone in a very low dose took care of the symptoms of irritability and inappropriate affect. After measures for the symptomatic relief came the efforts for a permanent relief of the symptoms. Of course, there was no cure for his intellectual disability. However, his incorrect thoughts, emotions, actions, and reactions were preventing him from using whatever intellectual ability he did have, and also causing a lot of distress to both him and to those associated with him. He was trained to identify which of his PDs brought him unhappiness the most. They were laziness, lack of planning and prioritization, anger, expectations, attention seeking, negative thinking, low self-worth, and so on. After taking autosuggestions regularly for the above PDs, taking 3 PDs at a time, his behavior slowly started changing for the better. The change was noticeable to others much before it was to him. His attention-seeking behavior reduced remarkably. He slowly became emotionally self-sufficient. He painstakingly learned how to plan his day and prioritize his resources of time and energy, asking for help and guidance from his siblings and colleagues wherever needed. As a result of these efforts, his self worth improved slowly. He is presently working in a computer repair shop and persevering in his efforts at PDR. He is also chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and has taken up efforts to have a sattvic lifestyle. With the combined effect of the PDR, spiritual practice, and sattvic lifestyle, he and his family are finally well on the road to having peace of mind. Now, coming to the second case study. This was a very interesting case of a 56-year-old accountant working in a private prestigious firm. He is extremely good at his work and hence a much respected and valued resource person. He came to me on a chance thought based on something a colleague of his had shared with him. This man had started experiencing pain in his left thigh since the last 5 to 6 months. Lately, the pain had turned excruciating and debilitating. The pain would be such that he would be forced to abandon his work and clutch his thigh in the office itself in intense pain and despair. He consulted doctors from other faculties, but never thought the pain could have its origin in its psyche. The distress slowly increased to such an extent that he would be awakened from deep sleep due to the pain. One day, his colleague shared with him how the PDR process helped him save his marriage from divorce. On the same night, he was again rudely awakened from sleep as his thigh was hurting unbearably. As he came to full consciousness, he realized that he had dreamt that his boss was shouting at him for a trivial mistake. He then realized that he was highly stressed because of his boss's habit of shouting even at trivial mistakes in hearing distance of others in the office. He found such episodes deeply humiliating and unfair. He would start trembling and get palpitations in such situations. Lately, these symptoms would come up even in anticipation of such a scolding. He was thoroughly fed up and lately was finding no joy in his work, yet was forced to continue it to fulfill financial obligations. At this point in time, he had a sneaking suspicion that his pain could possibly have a psychological cause. So he came to me on his own initiative. After history taking and perusing of his fat folder of consultations and tests, thereby ruling out other physical causes of his physical symptoms, I put him on a small dose of anti-anxiety medicine for just a week, to which he responded very well. I explained to him that he did not have to live in fear of the boss. I taught him the method of conveying to the boss through his supportive colleagues how the boss's thoughtless behavior was affecting him. I then explained the PDR process to him and we discussed his PDs due to which his boss's insensitive behavior affected him so adversely. The main PDs we identified were anxiety, lack of assertiveness, emotionalism, low self-esteem, expectations. He started the PDR process with enthusiasm. He also complemented the process with spiritual practice and taking up a sattvic lifestyle. At the first weekly follow-up, he reported that his pain had reduced by 30% and he had woken up only once in the past week as opposed to almost every night before starting the PDR process. At the third weekly follow-up, he reported that the pain was negligible and that his colleagues had remarked to him that it felt good to hear him chuckle and laugh aloud in the office after many, many months. He had also started feeling more relaxed. His fear of his boss is now much less, and he is learning techniques of self assertiveness. However, the good part is that instead of being happy and satisfied with his modest success, like many do, he became more ambitious. During the course of therapy, his self observation skills had increased. This helped him realize the other areas of life in which a number of his PDs were bringing him grief. Though they were not as dramatically painful as the incidents with his boss, he realized that they were casting a dark shadow on his life. So he started working on these other PDs also. This resulted in a good improvement in his relationship with his parents, wife, as well as his son. I have presented the topic of how to overcome stress using the PDR process and how to complement it with spirituality in a nutshell. Those who are interested in learning more about it can visit the SSRF website. The Spiritual Science Research Foundation, or SSRF for short, is a non-profit organization registered in Australia, US, and Europe. His Holiness Dr. Athavale is the source of inspiration of this organization. We collaborate in spiritual research and they publish the findings of this research on the SSRF website. I will now briefly show you some pages where PDR and related topics are explained in great detail on the SSRF site. I would like to first take you to the Introduction to Personality Defect Removal page. This article gives you some scenes from around the world. This shows how people the world over are stressed because of their personality defects. Then we can read about the impact of mistakes at an individual level, close relations, impact on society. The article then tells you how PDR will help you. I would now like to show you how to fill the PDR chart part 1. This article gives an introduction to self-analysis and it explains to you how to fill the various columns in the PDR chart. Now the third page is how to fill the PDR chart part 2. In this article, self-analysis of the root defect is explained in detail. Also, how to make out if it was a manifestation of a PD or it was an ego manifestation. It also gives detailed instructions on how to fill the chart. The page on mental health gives you an overview of a holistic approach to mental health. It tells us the spiritual causes of mental ill health. Many case studies of how people successfully overcame their mental problems is also documented. The page on overcoming various problems in life, including depression through chanting. This case study of Ian documents his life from 4 years of his age. Right from this age, he was beset with a variety of physical and psychological problems, including severe depression. His spiritual practice and how it changed his life is also described in detail. Then we come to the Overcoming Anxiety Attacks and Depression Through Spiritual Practice article. Now this case study documents the journey of Alison from a troubled childhood to her anxiety-ridden teenagers, to her adult years of losing control, her attempts at seeking help from a variety of professionals, her difficulties in marriage and settling down, her turning point upon taking up spiritual practice, and later, the positive changes in her are worth a read. Overcoming depression caused due to a paranoid personality disorder or paranoid disorder. Psychiatrists are generally most frustrated when it comes to treating depression caused by a psychotic disorder. This case study gives an insight into the root causes and management of Raoul's depression using the PDR process. And last but not the least, I like to show you the page on benefits of spiritual practice. This page gives vital information on a variety of topics such as the balanced state of mind, personality development, increased tolerance for pain. If you have questions regarding the PDR process or on any of the articles, please use the login facility available on the website. We answer questions within 48 hours of posting them. So to sum up, we live in a world of instant gratification. We want a pizza, we pick up the phone and call. We want to buy something, it shows up from the Amazon the next day. You want to watch a movie, download it. And all this without leaving your bed or chair. Yet the fulfillment of such desires does not give us lasting happiness or peace of mind. Also, the quest for sustained happiness and peace cannot be purchased, as it is earned only through lifelong dedicated efforts for self-improvement, through regular PDR, sattvic lifestyle and spiritual practice under the guidance of an evolved spiritual guide. However, if one sincerely does spiritual practice as per the universal principles of spirituality, then it will be only a matter of time before one is able to transcend the mind and obtain the experience of the soul or the God within each of us. This is the experience of bliss, a superlative form of happiness, which is not dependent on any external thing. Thank you for taking time to attend this webinar. I wish you all the best in your efforts to find happiness and peace of mind in life. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. It was, in fact, a very enchanting session. The session is now open for questions, and we already have a number of questions coming in. I would just like to confirm, ma'am, can you hear me clearly?
Dr. Shreya, I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, ma'am. So before we begin taking questions, I would just like to share some feedback. Global and Lockdown Talk Show, they say thank you organizers for the session. Anirban Yogi says statistics in the beginning was very informative. Another viewer on YouTube says Dr. Nandini is an awesome speaker and her words are so enlightening. Dr. Suraj Pawar says this is an extremely nice information. No one ever thought of improving personality defects in such a proper way. Very thankful.
Thank you, Dr. Suraj Pawar.
Omkar Seloke says very nice and simple examples, madam. Also explained in detail.
Thank you, Omkar.
A number of comments, great comments coming in. We cannot take them all, so let us move to the question and answer session. Okay, so we have a question from Arnab Majumdar from YouTube. Does stress always come from outside factors or it can be internal? So I think ma'am has already answered this question very nicely during the presentation. We move on to the next question.
Dr. Shreya, if I may add a comment to this.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. I like his question because this is a question that comes to the mind of many people. because we are aware only of the external stresses, but the internal stresses, how we think, what is a perspective towards life, that is what basically decides about how stressed we are. Let me give you an example. Now, in this very session, we were having so many difficulties. So there were so many external stresses, but you saw I did not get so stressed. That is because the internal stresses have been taken care of because of 20 years of the PDR process that I'm doing. This is just to give you an example. Even in a very expressly stressful situation, you can be stress free if the internal stresses are not there. You can go ahead, Dr. Shreya.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question from Global Unlockdown Talk Show. Is it possible to give autosuggestion indirectly to a large group of people together?
As I explained in the session itself, a single autosuggestion is not applicable to a group of people because each person has different PDs and the incidents or the mistakes in their lives are also different. Like, for example, Dr. Shreya and Dr. Nandini Samant are different people. Their situations are different and their way of thinking is different. So, how could a single autosuggestion work for both Dr. Shreya and Dr. Nandini? But here I would like to suggest that for small children, we can use the autosuggestion, meaning the mother can give the autosuggestion for the child. But again, it would have to be tailor made for that child's situation. We cannot give a group autosuggestion, no.
Okay, ma'am. Another question, Anita from Zoom is asking for recording of the session. So I would just like to inform all attendees that this video will be available on YouTube to view it later, and you can also share the same with your friends and family. Next question we have from Sumit Singh. Can we get rid of personality defects if I perform spirituality intensely or vice versa?
What is the vice versa? I didn't get that point. Spirituality and?
Can we get rid of personality defects if I perform spirituality? I think the vice versa means that if the person acts on their personality defects, can they progress spiritually? I think that's what it means.
Okay, I get the point. Spiritual practice does reduce our personality defects, but it is a slow process and it is like using a invaluable resource for something simple which can be overcome with some mechanical effort. Now, unless we have a study of the spiritual world or of spirituality, we don't understand really the immense power that is there in spirituality, or how much effort one needs to put to earn something in spirituality. Now, to give a broad perspective, taking up spirituality as a hobby and taking up spirituality for real internal transformation and transcendation are two different things. So if I really want to transcend and I want to use spirituality I have to do spiritual practice for that, I wouldn't like to use it on something so simple which can be overcome with simple PDR or efforts like that. To give you a small analogy, we wouldn't use a gun to kill a cockroach, would we? It is even worse when we try to use spirituality to reduce our personality defects. But his point is right. With increasing spiritual practice, our personality defects do reduce. But if a person has a lot of personality defects, it would be difficult for him to do spiritual practice. The initial stages he may be able to manage, but the later stages, the PDs would continuously put obstacles in his path. So if one can complement the PDR process with spirituality, then it works the best. And to answer the other part of it, just reducing personality defects and having a very good personality by itself doesn't constitute spiritual progress. We have to be very clear about this. Just having a good personality automatically doesn't amount to spiritual progress. That's all, Shreya. Next question.
Thank you, ma'am. So another question from one of our members, Supratik Pal. He's asking, is it helpful to maintain spiritual life from a young age, like around 4 years? Uh, can it help to make a stress-free? Can it help to make a person stress-free for whole life?
A very good question. And I thank you really to have asked this, because I can share this point now with all the attendants who are there for this webinar. This question is like asking, is it important to breathe from 4 years of age? We need to do it from the womb itself. I would say we need to start even before conception. The parents who will be conceiving, who would be wanting a child, if they start spiritual practice, the womb will be charged with positive vibrations. They will attract a good spiritual, what should I say, a good subtle body in the womb, which would give birth to a very good spiritually positive child. And if we can make the impression, the sanskar of spirituality right from birth, as so many of the seekers are doing, then, as he asked, yes, right from the childhood, in fact, infancy, the PDs are low. As we said, the chanting and practices like that, if the mother to be is chanting and then she conceives, and during pregnancy, if she continues to chant, the positive vibrations from the chant insulate the baby or the fetus in the womb with positive vibrations, and the negative impressions on the fetus are reduced. So the baby, when it is born itself, is at a better merit than the other babies. And it goes on like that. So my answer is, it is better
Thank
to
you,
start
ma'am.
even before conception. So 4 years is actually late.
Thank you so much,
But
ma'am. Another
I may end saying, let us start at least as soon as we know.
yes. So another question from Sumit Singh. How do you correlate personality defects to destiny?
With
Destiny.
destiny. Oh, yeah, yeah. This is again a very good question. Actually, destiny is nothing but the give and take account, or to put it even more simply, destiny is the outcome of what we have done in our past lives, the good and the bad, the merit and the demerits. So, if a certain person has a lot of demerits, then he has to endure it in this lifetime. Now, to endure demerits, a person would be born with more PDs so that he can experience that grief, the unhappiness. So, PDs, yes, a negative destiny will result in a person having more PDs.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have another question. What are the root causes or reasons behind the personality defects? Are there any spiritual causes also that lead to the development of PDs?
Yes, very much so. If we go behind everything deep down, then we would come to the spiritual causes like destiny, departed ancestors, distress by the departed ancestors, negative subtle energies in the environment, and so on. So many things. So, spiritual root causes are definitely there behind all our PDs.
Okay, ma'am. We have another question. Dr. Rima Khanna asks, how many PDs should be tackled at a time? And how long should one wait between two PDs?
I like this question very much because it is a practical question. So, usually we take up 3 PDs at a time, never more than that. So, each PD would have a corresponding AS. So, we take 3 PDs at a time, or a novice would start with 2 PDs at a time. Now, we do say novice can start with 3 autosuggestions in a day and slowly increase to 5. Now, I personally give 15 sessions in a day. So, depending on how many sessions we are doing, and what is our motivation. Then slowly, maybe in a week or 2 weeks' times, the intensity of the PD goes on reducing. Now, this again depends on how severe was that PD and for how long it has been. So, based on that, the intensity and the duration of the PD and the efforts that we are putting. Our PD, the manifestations of the PD slowly come down, start coming down. After say 2 or 3 weeks, we notice the change. And as the process goes on, the time taken for this shift becomes lesser and lesser. We saw how the ripple effect takes place. So as soon as we start noticing, say, a 30% improvement, that is a 30% reduction in the PD or the manifestation of the PD, we can leave it and take up another PD for autosuggestion.
All right, ma'am. We have another question from Dr. Anjesh. He says this is a great session, and he's asked that could get some of the PDs on the list, but there can be more. Can we get a list? Is this list available somewhere?
It is available on the website, and there are at least 100 PDs listed in that chart. You just go to the SSRF website. The URL for that is ssrf.org. And in the search, you just put PD list. You'll get the list of PDs.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Sumit Singh. Can you provide us with tailor-made auto suggestions?
Tailor-made auto suggestions have to be tailor-made. But yes, Dr. Sumit, I get the drift of what you are trying to ask. You can, again, I would suggest you go to the SSRF website, and we have given them a long list of suitable auto suggestions on various incidents. So you can go and check them out and then match with your own PD and incidents.
Okay, ma'am.
You
Another
can just
question.
go on the website and in the search box, put auto suggestions.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a question from Shilpa on Zoom. I have a 11 years old son with autism. He has OCD-like behavior. Can I give him auto suggestions to improve his behavior?
Very definitely. Very definitely. He may himself not be able to take the auto suggestions, but Shilpa can give him. And slowly we can train him to read from the auto suggestions. So in the initial stages, we start the process with the mother giving the auto suggestions. Then in the second phase, we give the auto suggestions to the son in writing, and both do it together. So the mother gives it and the son looks at it. And slowly the mother can supervise while the son reads it alone. In time, he may memorize it and say it himself. But it is very important to make the son independent of this, though in his case, it is going to take a longer time than it takes for us. But it is well worth it. Thank you, Shilpa, for your questions. It may help many.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Vidya. Please give some suggestions for anger control.
Sorry, please come again.
Please give some suggestions for anger control.
So for anger control, one thing is to look into the incidents, analyze them as we have shown in the slides, and then frame autosuggestions accordingly. So here it would be incorrect reaction. So A2 type of autosuggestions. Now along with this, what he can do is also the C2 C2 autosuggestion. That is the method of pinching himself. So every time he realizes that he is angry, he pinches himself. So he is made aware of it, and slowly the incidents come down. Now for anger, another thing that we can do if it is really high and not coming down with this is to take punishment. What he can do is skip small things in the beginning. Like for example, he likes sweets, so he skips partaking of a sweet if he is angry or he loses control in anger. So things like that, or doing something extra which he doesn't like. Like say he doesn't like in throwing the garbage out, then maybe he takes that up as punishment for him. So things like that, if done together, and of course spiritual practice is the best. So all this together will definitely help us overcome our anger. Again, about this, we have said in great detail on the website. So you can please go to the website and in the search box, put the word anger.
Okay, ma'am. We have another question from Vanilla. How can I consult for a treatment for my son?
Sorry, please come again.
How can I consult for a treatment for my son? I think treatment with respect to PDR.
Now, this is a tricky question. I being in Goa, um, maybe you can write to Shriya and we can look into it.
Okay. Ma'am, we have another question from Dr. Rajendra Gavaskar. How can the emotional quotient and spiritual quotient be differentiated?
Very good question. A emotional quotient basically is a sum total of our emotional attributes. That this is something at the psychological or mind level. And the spiritual quotient is at a higher level, much higher level, which does not include any aspects of the mind per se. Spirituality, as I said, is beyond the five senses, mind, and intellect. It is very difficult, basically, to get a correct IQ of the spiritual quotient, But broadly or very superficially, this is how I would differentiate it. Emotional quotient is about the mind, bhavna, and spiritual quotient is a higher level, what we call bhav. It is spiritual emotion for God. So there is a differentiation. And again, Dr. Gavaskar, I would encourage you to go to our website and write spiritual emotion, spiritual quotient, and you will get it. I'm sorry I am answering the questions in brief so that I can address many questions.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Mahesh. How can it be used in a diagnosed case of personality disorder?
How can we use PDR, you say?
Yes.
Yeah. It is basically the same thing. See, when we have diagnosed a case of personality disorder, it means it is even more entrenched. So, along with all the other efforts that we are putting in, if we use the PDR, it will help reduce the PD in that. Basically, personality disorders means a strong, a severe collection of many PDs. So, if we do the PDR process in this person, then the PDs will come down slowly, and then the personality disorder that is that is a manifestation of basically the personality defects. As the personality defects come down, the personality disorder automatically comes down. Like the first case study that I said, he was borderline mental retardation with behavioral problems. So he had a kind of borderline personality disorder which responded very beautifully to the PDR process. Personality disorders are good, PDR is good for them.
Okay, ma'am. We have an interesting question from Subramaniam Ramaswamy. He's asking, is multitasking a defect?
No, it is not. Multitasking is a quality as long as it is giving positive results. If the multitasking is causing a lot of stress or it is giving a negative result, in that we are having our fingers in too many pies and spoiling all of them or many of them, at that point in time, multitasking, as we call it, would actually be a PD of lack of planning and prioritization. I hope I have answered your question, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Thank you, ma'am. We have another question. Ma'am, as many gurus expressed that everyone has come to this earth with their karma. Then his personality and behavior is also predefined by nature or Almighty. If so, then there is the question of changing one's personality. I'm not clear on this. In my life, I am accepting everything, whatever happens, every moment. Please give me clarity.
Yeah. I like this question very much, and thank you for asking it. What you say is basically right. We come down to earth for the simple reason that we have some unfinished business, which we call karma. So we are definitely destined. But please remember that each one of us, or let me put it in another way, from the 100% of our life, some part of it is destined, and we do have a part which we call willful action or kriyaman karma. There is prarabdha and there is kriyaman. Remember in Mahabharata, when Arjun was standing in the on Kurukshetra and saying he doesn't want to fight. Now all that Mahabharata we know was predestined like anything else. There was Lord Krishna himself knowing that he has already slain the uh, all the warriors from the Duryodhan's camp, and yet he was urging Arjun to use his kriyaman, his willful action. So remember that there is a part of our life that is destined, and there is some aspect which is there in our hands, which is the willful action. Now, as we come down from Sakti Yug to Kali Yug, the destined part went on increasing and the willful action part went on reducing. And at this point in time, about 70% of our life is predestined, and we have only 30% in our hands to make what we want of our life. But please remember that even if 95% of our life was to be predestined, we can use the 5% of willful action which we have in our hands to make our life as we want it. It only means we have to put better efforts, by which I mean spiritual efforts, under the guidance of a spiritual guide, a evolved spiritual guide, so that we can bring about this turnaround in our life. I hope I have answered your
Thank you,
question.
Yes, ma'am. We have another question from Sushant. I have a 15 and a 11-year-old. I want to introduce PDR to them. How can I do so? As it is difficult for me to even talk to them and convince them.
I congratulate you, Prashant, for having this thought. This would be one great thing, the best gift that you're giving your children. This would be the best way to invest in their future, the best insurance that you could give them. Yes, even at this tender age, your children can be taught PDR, and it can be done. It's just a matter of applying our minds to it. Like, see, during my childhood, we were not taught computers. Even after I passed my post-graduation, I did not know anything about computers. But now small children also know everything about computers. I didn't know till recently how to use a WhatsApp. But I see toddlers also knowing how to go about using a mobile and everything. So it is a matter of training. So if we know about PDR and we use it and we realize it important and we are well versed with it, we can teach our small children to do it. Many small children in the Spiritual Research Center are regularly using it, and they are much better than their contemporaries. And this is what the schools and colleges in which they go, the staff over there is giving us feedback that these children are very different. And why are they different? Because they are doing the PDR. So they have to be like how we help our children in their studies. We don't leave them to it. We help them, we supervise it. In the same way, if we supervise the PDR process for our children, we teach them, they will definitely be able to do it. In fact, in many families, because the parents are doing the PDR process, in small childhood, the child also comes and says, "What are you doing, Dad? What are you doing, ma'am?" And the mom and dad are writing their mistakes diary, and they read and they learn, and they also want to do it themselves. So before they know anything better, they are also doing the process, and they can see the change in themselves. So yes, very much so. Our small children need to be taught PDR, and it can be done. And the earlier we do it, remember, as I said in that slide about the conscious and subconscious mind, each impression, that is, each PD, is more and more intensified the number of times that impression is reinforced. So if in my 50s I'm starting the PDR process now, you can imagine how deeply entrenched my PDs will be. Whereas if I was to start it at 5 or 10 years of age, how deeply entrenched would be the PDs? It would be like so easy to remove those PDs at that tender age. So please go ahead and try it for them. And best of luck to you. Dr. Shriya, are you there?
Namaskar. Ma'am, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am, it's 7:55 now, and we still have a lot of questions left to be answered. Should we take some more, or should we wrap up the session?
We can take, definitely.
Okay. So, ma'am, we have a similar question. Like you said, about incorporating PDR at a very young age. So this question from Sudhakar Kumar is that normally we find children have very less interest towards spirituality, but as they grow older, we find more. Request to highlight few steps to increase spirituality at younger age. So this is about spirituality, how to inculcate at a younger age.
Yeah, actually, children are mostly mirrors of their parents. You see how the trend goes in each family. Usually, children imitate their parents. So, if the parents are practicing spirituality, the children will emulate them. So, understanding the importance of spirituality, if we imbibe this quality, this impression on them in early childhood, it will help them. So, depending on what is the kind of spiritual practice that we are telling them, if it is difficult for them, or if it is not keeping with the trend of today's life, or if it is hampering their day-to-day life or activities, depending on all this, it will be either easy or difficult for the children to accept it. So, we can go about it in such a way that in the early stages, we tell them such spiritual practices as are easy for them to take up, with minimum knows and maximum how to do it. Like for example, if we start with chanting, this is something very simple. The parents sit to chant, the child sits with them, and they chant together. Or say singing of arti or stotras. Now all this creates a positive impression on the mind of the children, and this again helps in improving their chanting. Now, this done together will give them positive experiences in their life, starting from small material things like finding something that they had lost somewhere, or when they were fearful of a teacher scolding because they had not completed the homework and they did not have a adverse comment from the teacher, and so on, to feeling relaxed, to feeling calm, to feeling happy, to be able to deal with life. Now, such kinds of spiritual experiences push the child towards doing more and more spiritual practice. And also, as the more we do spiritual practice, the easier it becomes, till such time that it slowly becomes a way of life.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a question. How does spirituality help in curing skin diseases? This question is from Rinal, and I would also like to know the answer to this question in particular.
Yeah, this is also a very good question. Now, spiritual research has shown that the root causes of 80% problems in life is spiritual. Spiritual means beyond the understanding of the mind, five senses, mind, and intellect. Now, skin problems in particular and chronic ones specifically are mostly due to spiritual root causes. The attending or superficial cause could be something physical, but underlying it, what is causing it, sustaining it, or not allowing a recovery or a full recovery, causing frequent relapses, is mostly spiritual. We have a case study, actually, a very good case study on SSRF. Where you can go and type the word Samir or skin case study, and that case study will come. So, in the case of Samir Sangha, person from Canada, as also another person we know from Australia, both these people had skin condition. Now, in Samir's case, it was a very, very painful skin condition, and it was really mortifying. And this was this eczema, very, very highly intense exfoliative eczema right from childhood. So he had this allergy and his skin would exfoliate. And he had tried all kinds of remedies for this, but it was not going. Then he came to spiritual practice, and through subtle sense, the sixth sense, it was diagnosed that the underlying spiritual root cause of this physical condition was distress by departed ancestors. So he was advised, along with all his medical treatments, to complement the treatment with the chanting of Shri Gurudev Datta, which is a chant which is specific for distress by departed ancestors. After he took up this chant, his skin condition slowly came down, and you can see how he was all these years and how he is looking now. For this, I request you to go and visit the website and have a look for yourself. There was this another person, this is from Australia, his name is John, and he had again exfoliative condition, a dry skin, and this would come up and was there for many years. He had also consulted many specialists in the field, and it was not going. Then a friend of his, a seeker, told him that this could be spiritual, and he told him to chant the name of the chant Shri Gurudev Datta. He started it, and within a week, it totally went away. Now, the funny thing is, this person, being John, felt guilty that he is taking up chant of another religion. So he became very conscious, and he was not comfortable, and he dropped the chant. And in 2 to 3 days' time, the condition came up again. As it was increasing daily, after a few days, he again took up Shri Gurudev Datta. Again it came down. So this happened 2-3 times, and then he realized that yes, Shri Gurudev Datta is the specific medicine for his skin condition. This case study is also there on the website. Please go and have a look. So, Dr. Shriya, for all your dermatology, all your chronic skin conditions, please bear in mind that despite best medical treatment, if they are not going away, then it is possible that it has a spiritual root cause. The specific diagnosis, of course, can only be made only with advanced sixth sense. But intellectually, this is how we can decide whether it is because of spiritual causes or medical or physical causes.
Thank you so much for this answer, ma'am. I'm sorry to all attendees that we have exceeded our time for the webinar, but so many interesting questions that they had to be answered. We shall now, again, I apologize if we could not answer all questions. However, please send in your questions and queries via the feedback form, and the MEB team will definitely get back to you and answer all your questions. Now we shall proceed towards the closing session of this webinar. It was indeed a great pleasure to hear Dr. Nandini Samant from the Maharshi University of Spirituality. And I'm sure the guidance and tips given by Nandini ma'am will be immensely useful in overcoming stressful situations that we all face at one point or the other. While feeling overwhelmed with such a huge number of registrations from across the world for this event, it also made us realize how pervasive the problem of stress is in today's life. And I hope we will be able to implement the methods advised by Dr. Nandini ma'am and manage our stressful situations effectively. On behalf of the South Asian Medical Students Association, also known as SAMSA, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to ma'am for sparing your precious time and enlightening us today on a holistic approach to stress management and also about inculcating spirituality in our daily lives. I would also like to thank all participants for taking out time to attend this webinar today. And in the end, I convey my sincere gratitude to my SAMSA team and especially my juniors, Ipshita, Anjanashru, Abhirov, Korpujit, and Anisha, for managing all arrangements and executing the event so well. And just a reminder to participants, all attendees shall be awarded with a certificate of participation. So do fill out the feedback form posted on the YouTube and Zoom chat box. Before we end, I'd just like to request all attendees on Zoom to please switch on their videos so we can take a screenshot.
Namaskar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank SAMSA once again and all the attendees who encouraged me by the attendance as well as the inspiring questions. I pay gratitude to my Guru, His Holiness Dr. Athole, for getting this webinar done through me.
Ipshita, please inform me once the screenshot is done.
All screenshots have been taken. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. We can stop the live stream now. I wish you a great evening and may you have a blissful life ahead. Namaskar.
Namaskar.